Welcome to another episode of Fight the Burnout. Today we have a very special guest, Gavin Greaves. He is director at Apex Advice, also technically my boss, but I'm very privileged to be interviewing him about burnout today, and obviously in the insurance world, how that can be affect performance and just everything. So Gavin, as I like to do, I like to let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and maybe some experiences that you had with burnout.
First of all, thanks for inviting me. Look, it's always great to be able to share stories. I love podcasts and hearing about other people in the world. I think it's really, really important that we continue to tell stories and allow people to relate to them, because that in itself is a mechanism for managing burnout. You're not alone, I guess is a good way of putting it. To come back to my personal background, where do you want to start? How far do you want to go? Look, I'm Australian, born and bred in Perth, and started. I went through university in Perth, lived on the beach. I love the ocean, and I bring that up because I'm a keen surfer. And when we talk about burnout or managing stress in my life, that's my go-to place.
Yeah.
When I'm in the water and relaxing, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a bit of background. I've always been physically active, running and whatnot. I got into triathlons, things like that, in terms of that part of my background. And I'm sure we'll explore a bit more of that as we go through and talk about managing burnout. In terms of the work aspect, or whilst that was all going on, I went through school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went into university and knew I wanted to go to university, but wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I fell into psychology and, funnily enough, geography. But the psychology really stuck out for me, and it was a good time back then. But I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through in terms of the benefit of doing a psychology degree. But I just always loved the human psyche, the study of humans, both for a benefit for myself to try and understand myself, but also when I'm interacting with people around me. And it's just an endless. It's just got endless scope.
Yeah.
No two individuals are the same, and no moment in time is the same. So the way people adapt and whatnot, and the mindset around that is continuously evolving. From that, I got into the business aspect of it. I really didn't so much want this clinical psychology, but I really liked the organisational psychology, and then I got into sort of business studies, and I was behind the scenes doing some financial investing, and had a financial planner that my dad sort of connected me with in Australia, and that sort of led me into my career, which was financial planning, after obviously spending some time doing some travelling in between degree and work. And that, as I said, that led into financial planning. I sort of will mention actually that, because I think this is an important factor as you go through. I started, comes back to my dad. I started working most when I was about 14.
Yeah.
And I had always had two or three jobs. And when other people were playing on the weekend, I'd often be working on the weekend. And that sort of set me up well for life in terms of getting a good mindset in terms of work and managing work and other things. And you must want to unpack some of that. Coming across into the financial advice piece, I then got into financial advice or financial planning back in, must have been about 97, 98. Got my qualifications in Australia over a period of time. And just sort of evolved in that industry. I really, really enjoyed both the human aspect, but also the problem-solving aspect. I think I've had an analytical mind in a sense, and I just love trying to solve people's financial jigsaw puzzles.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, hey, do this, do that. It's, if you do this, it affects this. There's a whole myriad of outcomes for an individual, and you just don't know exactly which one's going to be right, but you can have a reasonably good go at it. And just, so that sort of led into my career. And I did really well in Australia, and then in the about 2006, I already met my partner, or my wife now, 1996 or 7 when I was in Tokyo.
Yeah.
I was doing some travelling, and we just remained friends. But in 2006, we went to Bali, and one thing led to another, and that then led me to moving to New Zealand in 2007. April the 7th, 2007. And I've been in New Zealand ever since. I was lucky enough when I started here. I had, I guess, with my experience, a number of opportunities that I could take up. And I ended up settling on Apex Advice Group, and I haven't looked back. It's been an opportunity for me to be who I want to be and get what I want out of life, or my professional life, and grow into the role that I have now. I guess at the beginning, I never wanted to just be an advisor. I always had a goal of running a business. And the advice, and I'll say it to people, was my conduit to being able to achieve that. And I was a good advisor, and moved into what I do now. And as you evolve, and certainly running a reasonable sized business, it does come with a lot of stresses, a lot of responsibility, and a lot of moving parts. So again, I'm sure we'll come to talking about the rigours of that. So that's sort of from a professional background, and I don't know if you want me to ask.
Well, I mean, we'll get into the industry side of stuff in a minute, but obviously, like you said, there's the stressors of being running the business, but then also obviously the stressors of leading up till now. Tell us a little bit about those.
Most people left out a little bit about the family.
Now
I've got 3 kids.
So you throw that dynamic in there as well.
I was thinking about this on the way in here today. About this is the most stressful my life's ever been. It's the most unpredictable my life's ever been, because I've got to a point now where I've got so many demands on it. I've got 3 young children, sort of 8 to 11. I've got my wife, I've got the business, my family's in Australia, and so my mum and dad are. There's just so much pulling on my time and my mental capacity at the moment. At a time when, as you're getting a little bit older, you do notice that you're not
21 anymore. I'm younger than you, and I still feel it. I'm like,
sort of on the approaching sort of towards the mid-century. You start to notice that you're not as bulletproof as you used to be. So you do become more conscious, I guess, of your mortality. And you start to, or I've found that I've started to really be conscious of how I manage my health and and manage these stresses. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
you did a little bit. So obviously, there's a lot going on at the moment. I know everybody in the world at the moment, the last 18 months with COVID and not being able to travel. You said you have family in Australia. I've got family in the US that I'm like, am I ever going to see my grandma again? Kind of things. So I know that adds stress. You got kids. You got a very successful business here that you're one of the directors of. Obviously I've just kind of come into the business here, and I can see how well it's ran in that. So you've got pulls everywhere. How are you dealing with that stress?
If we're going to talk about how I sort of alluded to one before, which was my happy place, which is trying to get to the beach, get in the water, go surfing. And that's a great opportunity for me to sort of reset. Unfortunately, I don't get there enough. So I then have to work out other ways in between those opportunities. There's a number of elements. So I would say one of the first things for me is physical exercise. I love to remain active. I love to feel like I've gone and expended some energy. And that again is a happy place where you just get to check out, just focus inwards, and just you and whatever you're trying to achieve at that point in time, and all the other noise shuts out. I also love getting in the water in terms of doing swimming training. Is one of my major physical exercises. And the research now that's coming out about the benefits of swimming and resetting your mindset, and it's mostly one of the best exercises you can do in terms of managing your physiology and your mental state. So that's a key element to me, and I always like to have a physical goal. So next year we're looking at signing up to do the Waikiki to Auckland swim
Oh yeah.
as a relay. So I've always try and get a physical goal that I've got something to work towards, and that's changed over time. It used to be a time when I would be doing half Ironmans. My time constraints, my physical constraints, a bit of wear start to impact on that.
Yep. It
So
takes a lot of time to train for those, and when
it does, especially with the kids and whatnot. So that's one aspect, is the physical aspect. If I come back to just had my parents here for a month, and it just made me realise as well just those family connections, making sure that you've got those family and friends connections, and getting an opportunity to sort of to check out with that stuff or check in with that stuff. That's awesome. So social relationship, making sure that's good, and also with my wife. And kids. I love investing time in the kids, and again that allows me to focus on them. Like if it's a maths test or it's teaching me to do something, again, just all the noise goes out, you're just focusing. I think that's the big one, is just to be able to settle your mind. And that sort of leads into making sure I'm doing some meditation on a regular basis. Is really, really good, just to quieten the mind. Breathing techniques as well. And they sort of go with the meditation, and that's just amazing, just to open your lungs up, remember how to breathe properly. So many people, we forget how to breathe. We're often sitting in positions that don't allow us to breathe properly, and we shallow breathe, and it's not necessarily that great for us. So doing that deep breathing, that's been a godsend. Like if I'm finished work or I just feel stressed during the day, I'll just stop, and for a minute I'll just do some deep breaths. Just like, even if it's just a box breathing, 4 or 6 in, hold, 4 or 6. So that's been a great way just to quickly reset throughout the day. And that's really, really important, because when I'm working during the day, I can easily go from the second I walk into the office to the end of the day and not have had a break. Maybe I've gotten 5 minutes to go and grab some lunch and eat at my desk. And it's not unusual for me. And I know that's a really bad behaviour. So it's just sort of trying to manage that out. That also leads into the diet aspect. Our son, our family in general, my wife's been on a real health and nutrition crusade, for want of a better term, in the past sort of 4 or 5 years. It's been so beneficial for our family, and it sort of funny enough, it sort of set us up, because our son's been diagnosed with autoimmune disease, so had another stressor.
Had another stressor, especially in these times.
It's been pretty full on. That sort of got her set up for that. So we've been able to manage his circumstances with a really, really good diet, strict diet, and that sort of flowed through into the family. We've been really, the diet has been really, really important to make sure I'm getting enough of good things and minimise the bad things. So that's also helped with some stress. Something else I was going to chuck in there. But so the diet stuff is so there's all these elements that go around to making your health and well-being as strong as it can be. The other thing I was going to make, just taking out things that just drained on me. As I've gotten older, when you're young, you can mostly get on the booze or have a night out or something. And, you can
rebound the next day.
The next day. And now, because I am running a tight line, it's easy to fall under it. And it's hard to get back onto it or above it. And so I've just really pretty much cut out drinking. I'll have a few drinks here and there, but
nothing big.
Few and far between. So that's been a massive change for me. And I've sort of felt it coming on for the last 3 or 4 years. Sort of in my early 40s, I could feel that things were different, and I've been really conscious of that, to the point now where I hardly drink. I could easily go 3, 4, 5 weeks without even having an alcoholic drink. So that's been massive. And the other thing I say around that is that can be quite stressful. It sounds like lots of hard work.
It's lots of things,
It's so easy just to go through the motions, get home, get on the couch, whatever it is, and not actually stop and invest time and process and practice. And it is a bit of work to make that happen, but you can't let it stress you out. And that's all about setting those things up. appropriately. So making sure you got the right food in the fridge, making sure you got the.
I think it's also, tell me what you think. But I think it's also making sure that you're not trying to implement all of those things. Like if you're a listener that's listening right now and going, "Holy cow, I don't do any of these things." Don't try and implement them all at once. Just grab one thing that resonates with you the most and just start there.
I'll totally agree with you. That's what I was going to say is that, and I've maybe you've picked it up, maybe you haven't. There's been a journey over the last 4 or 5 years. Well, it's actually been before that, but certainly the last 4 or 5 years. And so I've mastered or gotten better at each one.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you forget to meditate, or you have a week or two of bad diet. But it's just a reminder to come back to it. And normally when you're not doing something and you go, oh, that's right, that's why I'm not feeling
oh, wait a second. Why?
And that's one thing I say is you don't have to be perfect. This is it's not 100% of the time.
No.
You're allowed to have some
off days and fall off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you just master's not the right word because it sounds like you've invested so much time in it. But if you just absorb one thing at a time and find what's right for you.
Yeah.
Because again, that's another big thing. Say for example, diet. There are lots of different diets out there, but every single human being's got a different genetic makeup.
Yep.
And it's really there's ways of finding out what foods and whatnot are better for you specifically, as opposed to going, well, that sounds like a good diet. They eat good because they're doing this.
Yeah.
And diet's not even a really good word. It's just just consuming the right things for fuel for your engine.
Yeah.
Is mostly a better way of putting it. And so if you are going to start to invest in this type of stuff, it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
There's some stuff you can start to implement reasonably quickly. And it's just sort of spending some time thinking about it, reading articles, getting an opinion about these things, making sure that your values are aligned to it, and it becomes so much easier to adhere to it or to make the changes.
Yeah.
But if you sort of are in denial or you just leave it over there, you never actually invest any time and change your mindset.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about, changing that mindset inch by inch, and then before you know it, it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
When you're at the shops, you pick up something and you'll look at the back and hey, this is not right, or it's put it back, or contains this or contains that, it's full of preservatives. It can be whatever it is. So it just changes. You just change your behaviour. But that's been. I make it sound quick, but it has been.
No, it's a long journey. That actually brings me to what started that journey.
I've always had an element of health and wellness about the way I operated. But when you're younger, you just feel bulletproof. And I've always eaten reasonably well, but I would also not be so, restrictive in terms of what I could or couldn't eat. Whereas as I've gotten a bit older, it's become more apparent the things that irritate me.
Yeah.
In my system and aren't good for me. So it's always been there, and I've always eaten good food. I was introduced to hunting and catching your own food and all that sort of stuff back in Australia.
Yeah.
And so we always get clean, good food to us. So that aspect has always sort of been there. And then as I went through and I started to get into the physical aspect and the triathlons and things like that, you just start becoming more and more conscious of when you're eating something, especially if you're doing long distance stuff.
Yeah.
You eat the wrong stuff, you can easily crash in the middle of an event, and it's you go into a dark place.
Yeah.
Which I love that bit.
I've done a lot of those. My background's obviously doing VIP protection, and I was training for armed defenders here in New Zealand, and that at one stage within the police, my goal was always to do that. So those literally 3 hours of sleep a night for a week kind of things, and it takes you to a very dark place, but you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah, and I think that resilience aspect, and I think it's good for everybody to find something that they can push themselves.
Yeah.
If you don't build the mental framework to be able to manage when things aren't going right or you are under pressure.
Yeah.
Is really, really important. But by the same token, you've also got to start to have an appreciation for where the line is, so that you don't stay in the red for too long.
Yeah.
It's not like just push.
Yeah.
You've got to go, okay, I've done this, I managed my way through that, I've now got to re-energise, ready for the next time I get pushed into a dark place.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously speaking more from a from a physical aspect and in terms of physical activity, but that dark place is all mental.
Yeah.
How often do you go to the Olympics, for example, and how many of those people have got very, very similar skills, and the person that wins is the person who's got the mental.
Yeah, it all comes down, and this is what I talk about all the time, especially with for the last few years I've been helping people get into the police, and I'm like, in order to prevent yourself from getting to those dark places, you actually need to put things in place before you even get there, and actually recognize when you are even getting there now, so you can then build tools around that, because then when Mike Tyson comes and punches you in the face side of stuff, because lots of things get dumped on you, you have all these different little things that you can fall back onto, and you can go, hey, wait a second, let's just kind of relax for a minute, let's reset, get these things back into place, and do what we know works for us, not all these quick fixes that we see out there all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And because there is a lot of, I guess, some of my mindsets come from my father as well. It sort of instilled a couple of ideologies.
Yeah.
One of them is one of his favourite saying is "shit happens."
It's true. It's true. You can't.
It's going to happen, and the other thing is turn every negative into a positive.
Yes.
You can't have life without negative adverse events. And I was just saying to my son the other day, if you don't have pain, you can't
have joy.
You can't have joy.
Yeah.
And you're just a passenger in life, as opposed to someone that is getting the most out of life.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be. You got to put yourself out there to a certain extent. So.
I say this all the time to people that I talk to, because I tell my story all the time of hitting literal rock bottom where I wanted to run away from everything. I was probably on that verge of suicidal, but I had seen so many suicides and what it does to everybody else that I care about people so much that I was never going that way, but was on that point where I'd make my motorcycle go as fast as I could just to feel something. And I go, I'm grateful for all that experience, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Definitely.
It's you have to have those pains sometimes, and even though they suck when you're going through them, like you said, at the moment you're strung real thin, but you'll look back on this probably in a year's time and go, oh, that was easy. You'll go, that was a challenge, but this is what I've learned from it, kind of thing.
And they change. Like I can go back to when my kids were born. I had my son, who was about 2 years and 4 months, and then we had twin girls.
Yeah.
And so we had 3 kids under 3, and 2 of them being babies.
Yeah.
And mate, that was how I got through that in terms of the sleepless nights. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that.
But that's
that's evolved into other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and it's probably also helped you in other things. When other things get thrown at you, you go, oh, that was pretty. This isn't as bad as that.
And that's why it's I guess when you are, and this comes with the psychology aspect as well. Is that it allowed me to sort of, when you're studying psychology in particular, start thinking inward.
Yep.
Not in terms of critically inward, but it's just, hey, what's going on here? I see how phrases that people say, body language, all sorts of things like that you start to look inwards and understand yourself a bit better.
Yeah.
It's just so pivotal.
Yep.
Because if you can, you can't be critical. You're allowed to make mistakes, but there's nothing wrong with having a version of yourself that you're trying to work towards.
Yep.
As long as you don't attach everything to that. You've got to allow room for it.
You've got to let it be able to mold as well.
Absolutely.
Because you'll learn and do new things, and in the future, that version that you thought you would be, like when you were 20, you thought you'd be this version. When you get to 40, all this stuff happens over 20 years, and you go, wait a second, that's not the version that I said there, but there's snippets of it, there's parts of it, because you've evolved, and that version constantly changes.
It's a really important thing. I think I saw, I've read some stuff about the people that have the highest expectations for themselves are the ones that suffer the most mental illness.
Yes.
Because they have these unrealistic expectations that they can never achieve.
Yeah.
And when they don't achieve it, they just fall apart. And you often see it, obviously, it's very clear with sports people. They get to the
pinnacle.
The pinnacle of who they are or what they think they are, and then obviously their career is quite short, and then all of a sudden there's this abyss.
Yeah. Or you look at like Michael Phelps, for example, gets all these medals, and he's like, well, that's not what I expected. You get that kind of, you put this massive expectation, but then when you actually achieve it, you're like, well, that actually doesn't. It's like people that are just striving out for money all the time. They go, oh, $10 million will solve all my problems. They get $10 million and they go, wait a second, I've got all these other problems, because they didn't go through the journey of the whole thing and the reasonings behind that $10 million to be perfectly, to be.
And look, absolutely. There's a couple of things that spring to mind when you sort of go through that process. And I often say to my parents who've just been here, so there's a couple of analogies I've been talking to them about, but you can't take the money with you.
No.
Money's not of value.
Yeah.
It can buy you some comfort and some choices. There's definitely aspects to that, but you should be going out there, in my opinion, and challenging yourself, because life's about getting into your uncomfortable zone. It's the only way you grow.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples of that.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but
so much good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, you can always come back out of it.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to do, sort of go in
Yeah.
now. But that's when you feel alive.
Yeah.
When I'm catching a real heavy wave on a really gnarly sort of reef break.
Yep.
And, if I don't make it, I'm gonna blast it on the reef, and you make it. And it's just like,
that thrill. I used to do a bit of surfing when I grew up. I sailed around the world with my parents, and so I used to bodyboard a lot, surf a little bit. I'm terrible at surfing, not too bad at bodyboarding, but you do it, you catch it, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. Mine's motorcycles now. You go through a windy, twisty road, and you hit that tight corner that you've hit a million times before, because you did, and it's still like you hit it that a little bit better, and you're like, wow, that was just amazing. You come out of it and you're like, wow, that was just whoa, and into the next one, and it just sparks you up and builds that. But I've done that corner a million times, and it's just that coming through it, and it's
definitely. And I think one of the other things, if you're going to come back to the burnout aspect, or just managing your mindset, you've only got so much capacity.
Yep.
And I think that's what creates burnout, is that you overload your capacity. And
I think you have so much capacity, but over years of the resilience, the growth, it slowly more and more can kind of get in there. But as you said, I feel people put too much in there too quickly, and then it's like, there's just all gone. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
And that's for me now. I'm just trying to balance it off. I've got to make sure I've got enough fuel in the tank.
Yeah.
But one thing I was going to allude to is it just focus on the stuff you can control.
Yeah.
When you start trying to control things that you can't control, you're on a hiding to nothing. And that's really, really important, because you just got to let go of stuff. I'll give you an example. Again, my parents have just been here, but they just before they flew over to New Zealand, their house was flooded. They're from Perth, and it's known to be reasonably dry, but they've had the wettest winter they've had.
They have.
I don't know, 50, 80, 100 years, I don't know. But they've just had all these floods, and like 2 days before they came, they had all these floods, and the house, they can't go and live back in it, and it's all been ripped up and stuff like that. And Mum was saying this morning, all the stress of going home to the house that's destroyed. I was just like, Mum, you can't control that, it's happening.
Yeah, it's done.
Focus on the things you can control instead of stressing about the stuff that you can't.
Yeah.
Because you've only got so much bandwidth. So focus on, hey, I'm going to get to go and stay here.
And it also creates more opportunities, I find, when you do that, because then you'll have this, the house is flooded, it's getting repaired. Oh, well, we're going to have a little mini holiday of,
it is a bit challenging. Luckily, they've got some good support, but it's just sort of that.
It is a challenge.
It's just sort of trying to deal with that. And again, we've been going through that with my son's circumstances, and my wife gets really wound up, as I can do, but then you just got to sit back and go, okay, let's just go through the motions. We can't control these things, but we can control these things. This is the process we're going to go down.
Yeah.
And again, just have faith in the process of the decisions that we've made.
And I think that taking action as well, just going with it and just being, cool, it's okay to go there, because so many people sit in that planning stage and go round and round and round and round and don't do anything and don't sit in anything. And then that burns you out even more, because you're constantly trying to figure out what to do.
Just the weight on your mind is just astronomical. And you think about it if you are at work or something and you're sitting there and you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Often it's because you're not pushing through your ceiling.
Yeah.
And once you get yourself busy and get focused and actually think a bit more deeply about what you're trying to achieve, taking the initiative, it can be any of those types of things. Actually putting some time into investing in a project in your own time and then delivering it back to work, whether it's to a manager, to a boss, to a shareholder, business partner. When you do that and you come back and I achieved that.
Yeah.
You start with a blank page and you come out with something. So that's a great way to get some confidence as well and get yourself back in the game. Because often you made a really valid point then. Sometimes, and I fall into it sometimes, you just don't get going.
Yeah.
And that creates more mental pressure than if you get going.
Yeah.
And just take action. And I always say to my son or to anybody, but just take the first step.
Yeah.
Then take the next step.
Yeah.
Take the next step. And all of a sudden you look back and you've climbed half a mountain.
Yeah.
Whereas if you stay where you were and didn't take any steps, and
trying to figure out how to take that first step constantly.
I could be up there now, but I'm back here.
Yeah.
That's even more pressure.
Yeah. It's that you sit in the how do I take that first steps for so long that you never actually take that first step.
And that sort of comes back to when we were talking before about your well-being, whether it's the meditation, the breathing, the diet, the exercise. It's just taking a step.
Yeah. And
you've got to make it easy.
Yeah.
You've got to take out the barriers. If there's a barrier there, then it's easy to stop.
On that, my opinion, I'd love to know yours, is sometimes that's actually asking for help. That's actually putting your hand up and going, hey, is there somebody that's done this before? Is there somebody, that's one thing I love about here in the office is there's so much knowledge. You put it all together, it'd be over 100 years of knowledge of stuff. So there's somebody that will have done something of some sort that can they can help you take that first step if you're sitting spinning in that, how do I take that first step?
Definitely. And that's half the thing is, a lot of people, you've got to know how to ask for help, or be comfortable to ask for help, be vulnerable. If you're not prepared to be vulnerable, then it's going to be really difficult to move forward because you can't know everything. You've got to learn off other people. If someone else would have done something before that you could learn off and get you to where you need to be quicker. And it's really evident, obviously, in a work environment. We try to foster a good work environment here where people, can feel reasonably safe to bring up stuff and try and that's, you've got to be prepared to do that to succeed. I remember when I started out, I'd get a project and I'd just invest myself into it and get to the other side because I wasn't satisfied with where it was. This didn't make sense to me. So I went and invested my own time into getting it to where I needed to be so my life could be easier. Yeah. I think that's a good way of looking at it is, the lazier you are, and I'll finish this statement before because it sounds funny when I start that, but the lazier you are, often the better you can be. And the reason being is that if you are lazy, you want things to be efficient. Yep. If you're lazy, you can do stuff, I should say. People with laziness don't do anything, but so I'm always trying to create efficiencies. Not because I label myself lazy, but why take 10 hours to do something? If I spent some time now, if I spent 10 hours now, I could turn that into 2 hours, or I could just do 10 hours every time I did it. Yeah. I think that's very important. I talk about this a lot when it comes to burnout, and when I'm helping people that are in burnout, or I'm helping people to prevent it in the future because they want more knowledge around it. Is I always tell them sometimes you need to take a break to actually move forward. You need to actually step back and put that oxygen mask onto yourself instead of trying to put it onto everybody else. As they say on the airplanes. Because you need to actually sometimes take that breath, do the things that fill you up. For you, surfing; for me, motorcycle riding. Do that thing, take that moment, because a lot of times you find that you come back and instead of it taking you that 10 hours, it drops down to that 2 hours because you're actually a little bit more refreshed. You're a little bit more, I can actually think clearly. I can actually do stuff, even if it is, if you're at work and it's like you're doing this and you're like, this is taking forever and I feel like I'm not getting anywhere.
get up and just go for a walk, go get some water, go grab a cup of coffee, whatever, just go to the toilet, come back, and just in that time, it will reset your brain to go, oh, actually, because when you're in it, sometimes it's just that buzz constantly. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, you do have to, and I'm bloody guilty of that. As I said before, I can lock in at the beginning of the day and quite easily get through to, I'm quite deep in the day and not have had a proper break. It is important to sort of have a break, absolutely. You've got to be able to step out of things. And again, that's where you maybe spending 5 minutes breathing, going and getting coffee, whatever it is. Just don't load up on sugar.
Yeah, because that causes it even worse.
So it's absolutely vital in terms of managing your burnout. And I'd say, for me, that's become really more evident now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention this before when you said about putting your hand up. Like, I will go and talk to my fellow shareholders and go, hey, this is too much at the moment.
Yeah.
Not that we can't achieve it, but this is unrealistic, and it's just working together to get things done.
Yeah.
In an appropriate way, and you've got to be able to. It's so valuable to be able to put your hand up. Getting back to that point from before, but it's also as valuable to say, hey, look, I've got to have this Friday off work. I'm going to go on a break.
Yeah.
And with the environment we've been in over the past, since March 2020, last year was just phenomenal. I think I had 1 week off in the whole year. And, when this was all unravelling, you had the stress of that, stress of family, stress of work. Trying to get everybody working from home. There's just so much going on. Just didn't know what the future really looked like, and you were just in overdrive for a period of 8 or 9 or 12 weeks. That was certainly the beginning, and then you were playing. You never got a chance. Well, I never got a chance for the rest of the year to sort of release from that. And then when I did, I was so buried. It took a while to get back to a level.
Yeah, to unravel it all.
To get back to a point where I felt like I was on all 6 cylinders,
Yeah.
So having those breaks, and that's either during the day, but it's also during the year.
Yeah.
And stepping away from stuff. Like we just had a couple of days off whilst my parents are here. We went down to Wellington, but it wasn't much of a break. Like I wasn't at work, but it was like logistically getting.
Yeah, you're doing all sorts of other different stuff with. Yeah, it wasn't your break.
Back and I've just gone, hey, look, I actually need some
me time.
And so we're organising to go on a ski trip, just myself and my wife, and look after the kids.
Yep.
And I'm just, and that gives me something to really look forward to. So I'm really pushing out for the next couple of weeks, go and do that, re-energise and come back.
I always tell people, from what I've learned, like obviously going through my deep burnout and then just doing a whole ton of learning on it all, is you've got to have something daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. And in that, they're proportionate as well. Your yearly one needs to be something like going on a ski trip and going, hey, I'm going away. That's why, I find it so important. My wife, pre-COVID, we used to go overseas every single year for a week to 10 days, just so it was just us time away, phones off, no social media, nothing for a week. And that, but then each day, I'll get up and I'll go to the gym, have those little things. Each week we'll do something where either my wife and I'll do something together, or we'll do it on our own. Like I go sailing now every single week because that's my thing. And then every month you have something, and it's just having those things so that it actually consistently recharges you, so that when you're not, during the other times, you can actually give everything that you have, which I think is very important. So real quick, I know we've touched a lot about on, kind of here at Apex and that, but for the team, first, actually, there was something I wanted to ask: is being at the top, what's it like compared to being at the bottom when it comes to burnout? In the business, in the scale of business, as you rank it, being at the director kind of level.
For me, it's much more real.
Yeah.
Like when you, I'm not saying you wouldn't experience burnout as an advisor, but your life's so much simpler.
Yeah.
You've only got a pretty straightforward process every day to do.
Yeah.
When you're running a business with multiple channels, various departments, regional offices, there's just stuff getting fired at you left, right, and centre. It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
And the goal is to try and make it more predictable, because if you can control that, then it's easy to manage. But in terms of burnout, I really have to be conscious of where I'm at. And I've felt it a couple of times where I'm going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I've just got to, okay.
Yeah. with that, because I know, I relate it kind of back to being a cop. Everybody's looking at you for the answers. Everybody's looking at you, and you're this one man. Or I know there's multiple directors in that here, but do you feel that kind of sometimes there's that at the top pinnacle thing, or do you use the people down like below you as well to kind of bounce things and use that?
I don't think I've got all the answers, and I think that's silly if you get to the top and you think you've got everything.
Yeah.
I will often refer, research, consult.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you've got to be prepared to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And not crucify yourself for getting it wrong. Understand that you've got it wrong, or the decision wasn't right, and again, control what you can control.
Yeah.
So what we do now.
Yeah.
Learn from it, move forward. Balancing of that, asking people and constructing the best decision you can. Being prepared to make a decision, not worried about getting it wrong.
Yeah.
But make the best decision you can. Don't just make it shoot from the hip. And as you have been in the business for a long period of time, you get to know it reasonably well, and there's a level of, I don't call it necessarily gut, but you get a good feel for what's right and wrong, and some of the things that are going to affect it. And really relying on the people that are around me. I really rely on my other directors.
Yeah.
That each one of us has got our own skill set, our own experience to bring to the party, and I don't try and be them, and they don't try and be me.
Yeah.
And I think having that good, clear communication is really
Yeah.
important. Not always perfect, but it's we seem to be able to get things done without too many arguments or too many hassles.
Yeah.
We can get consensus pretty quickly, so that's really, really important as well. Where you take everything on board, just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And saying that in terms of a working environment is also, trusting the people around us. You'll be experiencing now. We've got a advisor manager and then an RM manager, a team leader, and just making sure we've got that chain of command. I can come in and I can see things that I can fix, but I've got to rely on them to deal with it. Otherwise, I'm just trying to do everything.
Yeah.
And or whomever in here. So you've got to rely on people to do their piece, and if they can do that reasonably well, then you can continue to move forward. Because otherwise, you'll stretch. It's one of my things that's happened to me is I've just stretched myself way too thin sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you actually become ineffective, and then that by default starts to play on your mind because you're actually not achieving anything.
Yeah. I think that's real. I think that's a real key thing, and especially for listeners in that. For listeners, because obviously I work in here, I see a lot of it. But for listeners who maybe they're starting a business, or maybe they're an employee, maybe something, and they want to try and help out wherever they are. What are some of the things that you are proud of that are implemented here to help the staff not burn out, or that you'd like to see implemented in that hasn't been yet, or them do? I guess I should say.
It's not so much that stuff's being implemented. There are, say, for the support teams, I shouldn't say support, the people that are in the office full time, and they're working out of the office. Something that's been implemented is to have that one day working from home, and that seems to have helped people a lot. I think working from home is a fine line. If you work at home too much, it's actually a negative. You lose your sense of community, and a lot of people struggle to work home. But when you get that one day, I think it gives people a bit more flexibility, and they can. I think that's helped with the mental stability of the people that get exposed to that. In the advisor space, they got a lot of freedom. They get to move around quite a bit, so they don't need the work from home piece. I guess as a business, we've tried to implement obviously fruit in the common room. So we've got fresh fruit for the office. We've had health and wellness days to help people, and we've talked about those main pillars in terms of diet, breathing, exercise, all those elements that go into keeping you healthy, inside and out. So it's those types of elements that we put in place to influence that. I was going to come back to something before. We're not you've got to be careful. A business isn't supposed to be a social work type environment. We are here to
do a job.
But at the same time, we don't want to run people, whether it's ourselves or employees, into the ground. And so it's having a vehicle or a channel that people feel comfortable talking someone about. And I think we have that. I know numerous times people have come and spoken to me about their personal circumstances. So, come to the owner of a business.
Yeah.
And tell them some deep and dark secrets that, could potentially put your employment at risk.
Yeah.
It tells me that something's working.
Yeah, there's trust there.
There is. I mean, we brought it up a couple Mondays in our advisor meetings. And we're talking about sort of some of the psychological aspects of the role, and we've been going through and reviewing people's files in front of everybody and just trying to make it a safe environment.
Yeah.
Is what I would say. So they're the things, and I think that comes from, I guess, the attitude of the people that can influence the business.
Yeah.
And if we're not prepared to listen, then people aren't going to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I think once you start doing that and you start holding stuff back, then it's an opportunity to fall over.
Yeah.
I will mention something though when we talk about this burnout aspect, and we're talking about all these elements. I think people have to be careful that they don't start drinking the Kool-Aid, in the sense that they go and find a problem or an excuse not to operate.
Yes. Yeah.
You can do that.
It's all about growing and developing yourself, not creating a problem, but taking and just going that version, like we said about ourselves, just constantly going, hey, how can I be a better version of what I'm doing? Not so much, hey, I've got a problem, I need to solve it. It's how am I creating that best version of me? What do I want that to look like? Yes, it's going to mold and change in that, but what do I want it to look like? So I have a goal, as we talked about with the fitness side of stuff and that, and activities. How do I have that goal so that I can do it and then take one thing? And I always say this normally towards the end of the episode is always find that one thing that you got out of this and just implement it into your life, so that you can then go, hey, I'm actually making that better version of me, so that I can be that version that I want to in the future. Whether that just be I want to be a good husband, a good wife, I want to be good at work, I want to do whatever it is. Then it's that constantly. But as you said, not finding a problem just to find a problem, because we can do that quite easily.
Yes, people can.
Yeah.
And it's also why it's good to understand or get familiar with pushing yourself, and that's where the physical aspect can come in.
Yeah.
It's easy to push yourself in a physical aspect, and then go into a darker place mentally where you've got to fight through and get that mental toughness. Or resilience is a better word for it. It doesn't mean the word tough gets a bad rap.
Because it's how you interpret it as well.
When people say toughen up, that's in certain contexts is absolutely not appropriate. But building up some internal strength, some confidence that you can manage and handle certain circumstances.
I used to always say when I used to train people to get into the police, because you got to do a 2.4K run or a mile and a half if you're in the U.S. and that. But I tell most people if they've been training for 6 months or a year for it, you should be able to do it. It's all in the mind. The mind is actually holding you back because you're getting to that dark place in it, and your mind is telling you can't do it. Slow down. You're never going to get there. Whatever the demons, as I call them, are. And those are the same things that come up in other areas of your life that stop you from taking that next step up the mountain, as we've said. To try to shift us a little bit, I'm a huge why guy. I think we've talked about this before. Before we go into that, I have to say everything that you said is dead true, and it is actually very much implemented here in the team in here. Since I've walked in the last 3-4 months, I'm like, holy cow, this is so nice, especially coming from my background where some areas haven't been so nice. It's implemented and it works. Everybody's helpful and the camaraderie's here, and it's one big thing that was for me was I want camaraderie wherever I work, and there hasn't been one negative camaraderie side of stuff since we walked in. So I just want to praise that as well, Gavin. So I'm a huge why guy. I like to know people's whys. I know mine down to a T. It's I want to create less pain in myself and others. It's why went into the police. It's why I helped prevent bullying when I was in school. It's why I am doing this now. So, and I know mine stems back to my childhood, and from the work that I've done and worked on people and research and that, it all comes back to our childhood on some things that have probably happened, and it's been implemented and then just reinforced in what we've done over time. Mine's from seeing my parents fight, nothing real nasty, but seeing my parents fight, and also my dad going to chiropractic school when I was a kid, and I was in pain, so I didn't want to be anymore. And then seeing my parents fight, saw them in pain, didn't whatever, to try and get it to stop. What do you think your why is, Gavin?
I'd actually turn that on its head. And just say to you, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? And I'd say most stuff comes back to my dad.
Yeah.
Who just set a fantastic example, challenged me, and I was a different human being to Dad, and so it would frustrate him because I would approach problems differently. But now he has such an appreciation for what I've done, and I've always run my own race.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that was also instilled with me from Dad. Is just be your own person.
Yeah.
Keeping it simple. So that's sort of always been my driver, and I wouldn't say I've necessarily found. Some people find stuff they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And I don't subscribe to that. If you do, fantastic. If you're lucky enough, and that was one thing my dad did. He got into the Air Force, loved aeroplanes, loved the Air Force.
It's like my wife loves events. I'm like
made a career out of it. Do I love finance? Do I love this industry? Do I love what I'm doing? No. At times, absolutely. I think there's absolute place for it, but I don't. That hasn't been my driver. It's just to challenge myself, and I think that's what was instilled in me early on. Is just to continue to challenge myself.
Yeah.
So just keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. And as I said, there wasn't necessarily a specific point in time. Although I do remember as I was sort of coming through, I had a lot of fight in me.
Yeah.
Quite unassuming, but if you poke the bear, I pop up. And I know a couple of times that happened as I was going through life with some of Dad's friends. In terms of we would go away with them and they would try and put their expectations on whatever we're doing. So one time we caught this crayfish and they were bloody banking them up to take them home. And I was just like, mate, I want to eat some crayfish. We've just caught the bloody things. We're sitting here. This is the right. And this guy sort of, I said, mate, you know what you can do with your crayfish. It's those moments where you stand up and you realize, actually, I've got some intestinal fortitude. Yeah. I've got the capability to be more. Yeah. And I've found my voice, and that's mostly then has driven everything. Yeah. I do have an inner strength, and that was one thing my dad always focused on. You've got to trust yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. Yeah. And only you can make things happen. Yeah. And so that was sort of, that would be my why.
Yeah, I can see that why not, and to challenge yourself and others, because I can see it literally working here. I can see it constantly. I was trying to put my finger on it actually, because I always try and figure out what people's whys are before I even ask them. And you can see it when we have meetings, team meetings, and that it's not about you're doing this wrong. It's just challenging you to see where you think you can improve in that. And it is. You can see it. It's amazing. It's really cool to see. So what would be your number one piece of advice for, let's go two different things, for directors to start with, and then we'll go for those in the financial industry.
For director business.
When it comes to the burnout factor. It comes to the burnout factor. It can be generic as well. You can add that in there if you want.
The number one piece of advice, or an element, it's sort of a combination, is definitely try and spend a moment to understand where your, not to use the word weaknesses, but the things that are going to take you off task are, and try and improve those. And I notice it time and time again, if there's something that's draining on you, it's whether it's a relationship, whether it's the way you operate in certain circumstances, it is debilitating. It's like running a race with one, with
your leg tied up around your back.
That type of stuff. So if you're going to run a business and you want to try and manage burnout, you've got to minimise the leaks.
Yep.
because it is relentless.
Yeah.
Be conscious of your strengths and weaknesses. Don't try and be everything to everyone. And one that I'm working on, because I'm bloody hopeless at this, although I'm improving, is you've got to say no. And I'm getting better at it. Because I've always been someone that we've talked about, a challenge comes up, I want to try and fix it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Whether it's someone's financial circumstances, whether it's someone walks in here with a problem, it's an email, whatever, I want to get involved in it. So I've got to go, no, that belongs with that person. And not try and take it on board myself. That's very, very important. If you can get someone to do a job 80% as well as you can, then get them to do it.
Yeah.
And save yourself the time and energy and go and focus on things where you can add more value. And also manage your mind. So that's most big. I can rattle on more stuff, but
Yeah,
that's most key elements.
Yeah, those are some key ones. Would you say those same things for the financial industry, for financial advisors in that? Or different ones?
Look, I think those things run true no matter what you do. But in the financial industry, or in any industry, but we'll talk financial industry, we've just gone through some regulatory changes. And again, it's control what you can control. You can't control that. That's what's been told to you, so just embrace it and find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
The people that are resistant to change, and I always remember actually, this must be a good one, when I was travelling, I used to love travelling on my own. So I'd go overseas on my own. It was just an adventure. So who would I meet? And I was in control of it. Nobody else could influence me. You know, that was just so pivotal, being able to put myself in quite an extreme set of circumstances and get myself out of it. And I think that's really important, to be able to find control in an uncontrollable environment.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so when you come back to our environment in the industry, where we've got new regulatory changes, and a lot of people are struggling with that. I believe so.
Yeah.
And technology's never what it's cracked up to be, and we've got to use it. It's never perfect. There's always there's a lot more asked of you, and it's just going, okay, how do I take something I can't control and control it, a piece that I need to control. And once you work that out, life becomes a lot more safe.
I think that's so true. It's something that I've learned over the years, because I remember my policing background. I don't know if you have any friends that are cops and that, but the number one thing that they complain about all the time is that the guy didn't get enough of it, or the defendant didn't get enough for the sentence. And it's one thing that I learned after leaving. I was like, wow, that was the biggest negative drainer that we all had, was all the things that we had no control over. And it's so true. And you don't have control over it. Why are you focusing on the thing that you don't have control on? Focus on what you do have control of it even. Do the best paperwork, do the best, get the best things towards it so you can, have it. But I totally, I like that, and I agree with it. So as far as I like to ask if if somebody that's listening wants to get in touch with you, or maybe they want to find out more about Apex and that, we'll put the links down below. What's the easiest and best way for them to do that?
Oh, just email me or phone me.
Yeah.
That's not an issue.
All right, cool.
I think there's another thing is you've got to be prepared to put out. The more you put out, the more you get back.
Yeah.
So I'm more than happy to converse with anybody at any stage.
Yeah. Sometimes you might have to say no first and then come back to it.
It depends how much commitment's being asked about.
Yeah.
Links, but
I'll put all the links down below. I'll put your email down there. I'll put the Apex website and stuff down there as well, so that people can find out more.
I'm happy with that, or through LinkedIn.
Yeah, or through LinkedIn. I'll put your LinkedIn and stuff on there as well. Gavin, last question I'd like to ask is, what's your top tip to self-happiness? I know you've gone over a lot of it probably today already, but just to hone it in so that, at the very end of the episode, people can kind of, the last thing they remember.
I'll sort of say, look after yourself. Because if you're not looking after yourself, you can't help out with the people around you, or develop the relationships that you need, because it's just so important. The most important thing is the relationships. invest some time in yourself, then whether it's study, self-development, whatever, and better understand yourself, the more you can contribute to those around you, and the more you'll get out of life.
I love it. Any last words, Gavin?
No, I think I've said a lot. But yeah, no, look, it's an absolute pleasure, and it's almost cathartic. Although a lot of this stuff's in my head, I've never actually gone through a scenario like this and put it down. So to actually speak your truth, it sort of makes you aware that you, I guess, the way you think.
It's funny you say that. There's a lot of people that I interview actually say that afterwards. They're like, "Wow, that was actually, I needed to hear that from myself." kind of stuff. Well, thanks, Gavin. I really appreciate you being on the show. It's been an honor and a lot of really good insights. For those listening, make sure that I always say that share it out to somebody that you know, because there might be somebody out there that just needs to hear one thing in here just to shift them, or maybe they are on that journey already and they just looking for more. But there's so many, especially in these times, there's so many people that are struggling. We won't put anything around it. We won't bend around it. It's people are struggling out there because of the circumstances that are going on. I know I have struggling times as well because of being not from New Zealand and being an American and having lots of family over there. I'm like, am I ever going to see them? It's listening to things like this or even having these conversations that even helps myself. So make sure you share it around. Make sure, if you didn't get something out of this, go back and listen to it again and just take one thing away. As we said already, take one thing away from this and just start implementing it, because it's just going to create that better version of yourself. And lastly, if there is anything that we can help out with or you want to reach out to us, the email is fighttheburnoutpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to put you in touch with people, help out however we can, or even if you have people that you think we should interview, let us know. But till next time, thanks for listening. We love you, and we'll talk soon.